Wyoming Territory, spring of 1879. The wind carried snow melt off the bighorns, and Hattie Fairchild ran for her life. She stumbled down a rocky slope, boots slipping in the loose shale, skirts torn and streaked with pine sap. Her lungs burned. Her heartbeat roared in her ears louder than the mountain stream below. Behind her, hooves thundered 2 riders, maybe more. She did not look back. She had waited until dark to slip free from her father's ranch house, her bag packed with dried apples, a canteen, and her mother's old revolver. Her father had not noticed. He had been too busy toasting with that awful man, Silas Grant, the same man who had bought her hand in marriage with the promise of merging cattle herds and bringing Hattie into a life she never asked for. She was 23, not a child, and her father had not even looked her in the eye when he signed her away. So she ran. A branch snapped to her right. She wheeled around, gun raised, but it was not a rider. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped from the trees, bow in hand, hair braided and dark as wet earth. His eyes caught hers, sharp, steady, and fully calm. "You are being followed," he said, his voice low, accented but clear. "I know," she gasped, lowering her revolver just an inch. "Can you help me?" He nodded once. "Come." He turned without waiting for her reply. She followed, ducking into the forest behind him just as riders crested the ridge behind them. They moved fast, silent, weaving through the pines like shadows. Her breath hitched as twigs snagged her shawl, but she did not dare slow. They reached a narrow ravine choked with brush. He knelt, moved a few stones aside, and revealed a path so hidden it might as well have been carved by ghosts. He motioned her through it. She looked back one last time toward the sound of hooves, then ducked in. By the time they stopped, the sun had broken the horizon. They stood on a ledge overlooking a wide valley, green with new grass and scattered with herds of elk. Hattie could barely hold herself upright. She leaned against a tree, chest heaving, legs trembling. The man took a waterskin from his belt and handed it to her. "Drink." She did, the cool water easing the fire in her throat. "Thank you," she said. I do not know your name." "I am Otakan Kestrel," he said, watching her closely. "Of the Cheyenne." "Hattie Fairchild," she said, straightening. "From Rock Creek." "That was my father's land." He nodded once. "Why were they chasing you?" She hesitated, then said plainly, "My father promised me to a man named Silas Grant. I did not agree to it. I left before the wedding could happen." Otakan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "That man will not stop looking for you." "I know," she said softly. "But I would rather die out here than live as that man's wife." He looked at her, then not just a glance, but a long, weighted look. "You will not die," he said. "You are under my protection now." She blinked, unsure what to say. "Why would you help me?" "I saw a woman in danger," he said simply. That was enough. They traveled west through the foothills, keeping off the main trails. Otakan moved with the land, not against it. Hattie did her best to follow, though her feet blistered and her arms ached. He never rushed her. When she stumbled, he offered his hand. When she cried quietly by the fire one night, thinking he was asleep, he said nothing, just placed the last of the dried meat beside her and sat close until she stopped. By the 4th day, they reached a grove near a wide stream, where Otakan said they could rest longer. He built a small shelter from pine boughs and started a fire with flint and patience. Hattie helped where she could, gathering kindling, washing their clothes in the creek, sharing what little she had brought. One afternoon, while she was rinsing a shirt in the cold water, she looked up and saw him watching her from across the stream. Not staring, just watching, like he was making sense of her. She stood, water dripping from her arms. "What are you thinking?" "That you are not afraid of the wilderness," he said. "Only of going back." "I am afraid of being owned," she said. "By men like Silas." "By my father." He nodded. "You are not owned." Something warm bloomed in her chest. That night, they sat by the fire. She leaned against the log beside him, her shoulder brushing his. When he said nothing, she asked, "Have you ever been married?" He shook his head. "I was to be. She died before the wedding. Fever. I am sorry." He looked at her slowly. "You remind me of her. Not in face. In fire." She did not know what to say to that. So she reached out and touched his hand. He did not pull away. In the days that followed, they fell into a rhythm. He taught her how to move with silence, how to read the sky. She taught him how to laugh again. One morning, just as the mist was lifting off the grass, Otakan froze mid-step. Hattie followed his eyes riders in the distance. Too many for travelers. She knew who it was. "Silas," she whispered, her blood gone cold. Otakan turned to her. "Go down to the stream. Hide there. I will come." "No," she said. "I am not running again." He stepped closer. "Hattie, I trust you," she said. "But I will not leave you." He did not argue again. They made their stand in the trees. Otakan moved like a ghost, his arrows fast and true, his presence a wall between her and danger. Hattie, crouched with her revolver, fired only once, but it was enough to scare the horses. Chaos broke. The men fled. Silas was thrown from his saddle and left behind, crawling, bleeding, cursing her name. Otakan did not kill him. He walked to where Silas lay and said only, "She belongs to no man. If you return, you will not leave alive." They left him there. That night, Hattie sat beside Otakan on the hill. The stars were bright, the sky clear. She touched his hand again, then laid her head against his shoulder. He turned to her. "Are you afraid now?" "No," she whispered. "Not with you." He leaned in, slow, steady. When their lips met, it felt like something found not taken. "I will stay with you," she said. "If you will have me." His answer was simple. "Always." The days turned warmer, and the snow gave way to grass that reached Hattie's knees. The scent of sagebrush deepened with the sun, and the wind no longer carried ice but the hum of bees and the rustle of returning birds. Otakan led them farther west, away from the known cattle trails and trading routes, into hills that seemed to fold endlessly into one another. They camped in hollows and along creeks that barely made their way onto maps, if they were marked at all. One morning, they passed through a narrow canyon where the stone walls rose sharp and pale around them. Otakan glanced upward often, his hand resting near his bowstring. "Ambush country?" Hattie asked, her voice low. "Sometimes," he said. "But not today." She studied the way he moved, always listening, always reading the land. He didn't guess, he knew. She trusted that. Later, as they rested beneath a cottonwood where the roots curled like knotted fingers, she traced circles in the dust with a stick. Otakan sat nearby, mending a tear in his sleeve with thread drawn from the sinew of an elk. The fire crackled between them, quiet and low. "Did you have family nearby?" she asked, without looking up. He didn't answer right away. The needle passed through the hide once more before he spoke. "My mother's people were farther south. She died when I was young. My father was killed during the winter fighting. I have no living kin now." She set the stick aside. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "It is the way of things." The silence between them thickened, not heavy but full. She let it lie. After a moment, he leaned forward and stirred the fire's edge. "What of your mother?" he asked. "She was kind," Hattie said. "Too kind for my father. She used to sing while she worked. I don't remember the words, just the hum. She died after the fever swept through Rock Creek. I was 15. Otakan nodded once, then looked toward the hills. "You sing when you walk. Under your breath." She blinked. "I didn't realize. It sounds like a bird I used to hear in the spring," he said. "Before the grass grew tall." She laughed, a small sound. "That's not much of a compliment." "It is," he said without smiling, but there was warmth in his eyes. The bird always returned. They moved on the next morning, crossing a high meadow where wildflowers pushed up through winter's retreat. Otakan paused beside a cluster of blue blossoms and knelt. "Spring medicine," he said. "For fever and shallow breath. My father used to chew the root before battle." Hattie crouched beside him. "You know plants well." He stood and handed her one of the stems. "Enough to survive. Not to heal." She held it gently. "You could teach me." That night, they stopped near a bend in the stream where fish darted in the shallows. Otakan stripped to the waist and waded in with a spear carved from ash. Hattie sat on a rock, knees drawn up, watching him move with the current. The water caught the last light, and she saw the long scar that ran across his ribs. She didn't ask. She waited until he brought back 2 trout, both still writhing. As they cooked over the fire, she leaned closer. "What happened to your side?" He didn't glance down. "A cavalry saber." "I was 17. Were you fighting?" He met her gaze. "Running." She nodded, then reached and touched the edge of the scar lightly. He did not flinch. "You lived," she said. "I was carried," he replied, "by a woman from my father's band. She was old, but her legs were strong. She saved me." Hattie looked at the fire. "You've saved me more than once now." He didn't answer, but he set his spear aside and reached for her hand. His fingers were rough, warm. She let him hold it. The next morning, the wind carried smoke. Otakan halted before the crest of a hill and crouched low. Hattie joined him, peering over the ridge. Below, a small wagon sat broken beside the creek. A man, his shirt torn and face bruised, knelt beside it. No animals. No movement from the covered bed. Otakan signaled for stillness, then moved downhill in a wide arc, circling behind the man unseen. Hattie waited, heart tight. When Otakan returned, he spoke low. "He's alone. His wife is dead. Shot in the chest." They approached together. The man looked up, hollow-eyed, his lips cracked. "I buried my boy this morning," he rasped. "They took the horses. Left us nothing." Hattie knelt beside the wagon. "Who?" "2 men. One had a scar over his eye. Said they'd ride for the mines. Took my rifle. Left us with no water." Otakan brought out his pouch and handed the man dried meat and the last of their bread. "There is a trading station 3 days east," he said. "Follow the creek. Keep north." The man nodded slowly. "You saved my life." "No," Otakan said. "Your boy did. You're walking for him." They left him with a flask and a blanket. Hattie said nothing until they were well past the ridge. "Why did they kill his wife?" Otakan's jaw tightened. "Because they could." Hattie reached out and took his arm. She didn't let go. That night they didn't speak. They sat together beneath the stars, her head against his chest, his arm around her back. The silence didn't need filling. "In the morning," she said, "I want to build something. A place that doesn't vanish when the snow falls." He looked at her, quiet. "With you," she added. He nodded once. "Then we will find land where the grass is strong and the water runs clear." "And we'll stay?" she asked. He pulled her close. "Yes. We'll stay." By late May, they reached the edge of a half-forgotten valley nestled between low ridges, where cottonwoods lined the stream and the soil darkened from river silt. Otakan slowed his horse, standing in the stirrups, eyes sweeping the land. "This place," he said, "was once used in summer. The soil holds water. Trees give shelter. There is space." Hattie followed his gaze to where the land opened into meadow, a wide bend in the stream catching sunlight like polished glass. Elk tracks crossed the banks, and a pair of sandhill cranes lifted off from the grass with long, slow wings. "You think it could be home?" she asked. "I do." They dismounted and walked the ground. Otakan kept a quiet pace beside her, letting her take in the feel of it. She ran her fingers through the tall grass, letting the scent of damp earth settle into her. Will others come here? She asked. Not many. The trails move north. The miners pass this valley over. She glanced toward the slope where a cluster of aspens shimmered in the breeze. If we built a cabin there, it would catch the morning light. He nodded, thoughtful. We'll need stone for the base. There's a quarry near the ridge. They spent the next days gathering. Otakan cut poles from lodgepole pine, stripping the bark with sharpened flint. Hattie hauled stones from the creek bed, stacking them carefully. When blisters rose on her hands, he wrapped her palms in deer hide, tying the strips gently. One evening, while she was digging a trench for the foundation, she paused and leaned on her spade. My mother once told me a house should be built with hands that want to stay inside it. Otakan looked up from where he was shaping a beam. Your hands are already doing that. She smiled, the kind that came from the center of the chest, not the mouth. They worked slowly, methodically. Each day brought new tasks, cutting notches for joists, smoking fish to store, weaving grass mats to insulate the roof beams. Hattie learned to shape clay for chinking, to split firewood without bruising her knuckles, to listen for the shift in wind that signaled approaching weather. One morning, as she carried water from the stream, she heard Otakan's voice behind her. Your gait is changing. She turned. What do you mean? You move like the land belongs to you now. She considered that for a moment. Maybe it does. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You belong to no one, he said. But this place holds us both. They finished the cabin by early summer. It stood low and square, with a stone hearth and a single shuttered window cut from salvaged barn boards. The roof was sod, held down with river stones. Inside they laid pine boughs for bedding, covered with tanned hides and her mother's wool blanket. On the first night they slept there, a storm came through. Rain drummed on the roof, and thunder rolled behind the hills. Hattie lay with her head on Otakan's shoulder, listening to the wind test the walls they had built. I thought I'd always be running, she whispered. You aren't anymore, he said. She lifted her hand to his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath her palm. You make me feel known. He kissed the top of her head. You are. In the weeks that followed, their days slowed. They planted a small patch of maize and beans near the stream. Otakan carved a bow for her, shorter than his, and taught her to shoot by aiming at the hollow of a fallen tree. Her arrows flew wild at first, but she laughed more than she cursed. One evening, while gathering wild onions near the creek bed, she turned suddenly. Would you mind if we marked this place? He looked up from the basket he was filling. How? A sign, she said. But not just for us. For anyone who might come after. Something that says people lived here with care. He thought for a moment, then nodded. They carved a small post from aspen and etched a simple pattern into it, a circle crossed with two lines, the Cheyenne symbol for balance and wind. Hattie added a spiral, the shape of her mother's sewing mark. They placed it near the bend in the stream. That will hold, Otakan said. Later that night, as they sat beside the hearth, Hattie rested against him and said, You were right that first day. I was being followed. But I think I was also being led. He looked down at her, his expression quiet, sure. So was I. She reached for his hand and laced her fingers through his. I don't need more than this. Just this place. Just you. His answer was soft, but certain. Then we are already rich. June settled into the valley with long, golden evenings and the sound of crickets threading the dusk. The cabin softened into the land as if it had always been there, its walls weathering under sun and shadow, its roof blooming with grass. Inside, the air smelled of smoked trout, cut pine, and the pressed warmth of two sleeping bodies. Otakan rose early most mornings. Hattie would wake to the sound of his footsteps outside and the scrape of an axe against wood or the rustle of traps being checked. Sometimes, if she rose quickly enough, she caught sight of him through the doorframe, bare to the waist, water from the stream dripping down his arms as he washed before the sun crested the ridge. One morning, He returned with a quiet look in his eyes and a grouse hanging from his belt. Hattie stood at the hearth, grinding wild sunflower seeds into meal with the stone she'd shaped herself. "There's a wagon trail about a half-day north," he said, setting the bird down. "New tracks. Fresh." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "Traders? Maybe. Or settlers trying to cut across too early." He crouched and began plucking the grouse. "They're moving slow. 2 wagons. Children's prints." She knelt beside him. "Would they come this far off trail? If they're lost." She tied her hair back, thinking. "If they're in trouble, we should check?" Otakan looked at her, then gave a short nod. "We leave after Sinhai." They packed dried meat, a water pouch, and a stitched bag of root medicine. Hattie tied on her boots, worn but mended, and fastened her revolver at her hip. Either of them spoke much on the trail. The land rose gently into rolling bluffs, and the air grew hotter as the day leaned toward afternoon. They found the wagons near a dry wash, one tilted at an angle with a broken wheel. A man squatted beside it, his face red with sun and frustration, while a woman stood with a child on her hip, another clinging to her skirts. The horses were hobbled nearby, ribs showing through their coats. Otakan raised one hand in quiet greeting as they approached. The man stood cautiously, not yet reaching for his rifle but not far from it either. "We saw your tracks," Otakan said. "You're off the main trail." The woman's voice cracked from thirst. "We took a wrong turn 3 days back. Thought we'd hit the Powder River sooner, but the land kept folding away." Hattie stepped forward. "There's water south of here. We can take you to it." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Name's Royce. That's my wife, Luann. We come from Kansas." Otakan gestured toward their broken wheel. "You'll need ash or hickory to replace that. There's none nearby." Royce rubbed his temples. "We're a week behind already. I can't leave them here alone." Hattie looked at him. "Then we'll help you get them to water first. You can come back for the wagon." They guided the family to their stream by nightfall. The children, both under 6, played at the edge while Luann boiled river water and Royce soaked his shirt to cool his neck. Hattie moved through camp without pause, handing out portions of dried meat, setting kindling, showing Luann how to steep the roots gently so the tea wouldn't turn bitter. Later, when the children slept and the fire burned low, Otakan sat with Royce near the trees. Hattie joined them, brushing her palms on her skirt. Royce glanced toward the stream. "Didn't think we'd see help out here. Not this far from anybody." Otakan didn't answer right away. Then, "Most men only look where they'd been told to." Royce nodded slowly. "You two married?" "No," Hattie said. Otakan said at the same time, "Yes." They looked at each other. She smiled faintly. "Mostly, we just didn't stop walking." Royce chuckled, then winced and rubbed his shoulder. "Well, whatever you are, I'm thankful." They helped rebuild the wagon over the next day and a half. Otakan felled a young hickory tree from a shaded hollow and shaped the new spoke with a draw knife. Hattie kept the children busy gathering wild mint and teaching them how to twist it into braids for drying. Luann offered to trade a tin of coffee for their help, but Hattie only shook her head. "You'll need that more than we will." Royce looked toward the ridge. "You ever think of putting down roots somewhere with more folks?" "We have roots," Otakan said. "But not neighbors," Luann added gently. Hattie glanced toward the cabin's direction, hidden now by trees and distance. "We'll be enough for now." After the family left wagons creaking into the north like a slow farewell, the valley felt still again. The stream ran clear, the air held a hush. That night, Otakan sat at the hearth, sharpening a bone needle. Hattie leaned against the doorframe, watching the sky darken. "You said yes," she said after a while. He looked up. "When Royce asked if we were married?" Otakan set the needle down. "You didn't correct me." She crossed the room, kneeling in front of him. "Because it felt true." He rested a hand on her knee. "Then we will make it so. With the land as witness." She reached into the woven basket beside the hearth and pulled something wrapped in linen. She unfolded it carefully, a strip of blue wool, faded but clean. "My mother wore this on her wedding day," she said. "I kept it because it was the only part of that day she said was hers." Otakan took it from her hands, brushed his thumb along the edge, then tied it gently around her wrist. They did not speak vows. They didn't need to. But the fire burned low and steady between them, and their hands found each other's without effort. In the morning, they rose early again. There was fencing to build for the garden, a snare to reset, a bird's call either of them recognized, echoing from the ridge, and a cabin that stood quiet and sure, holding the shape of two people who had chosen not just to survive but to stay. The first frost came early, curling silver over the garden rows and tightening the air in the mornings until breath showed white. Hattie stepped out with a wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders, watching the mist lift from the stream. Otakan stood by the lean-to, rubbing the mare's legs with pine tar before the cold set in deeper. "We'll need to bring the last of the squash in today," she said, crossing to him. "I'll set the sled to haul it up," he replied, glancing at the sky. "Clouds are building from the west." They worked without speaking much. It was a rhythm by now, cutting vines, brushing dirt from skins, stacking them gently in woven baskets. The wind picked up as they finished, stirring the yellowing grass and sending a hawk wheeling above the far bluff. By evening, the cabin glowed with firelight and the scent of roasted roots. Otakan sat on the floor beside the hearth, carving a handle for the skinning knife. Hattie finished sewing a pair of mittens from rabbit hide, the stitches small and neat. "They're for you," she said, holding them out. He took them, fitting the left over his hand. "You lined them with moss. It keeps the damp out better than wool," she said, smiling. "My mother used to use it for boot padding." He looked at the mittens, then at her. "You make this place more than shelter." She reached for his hand, the firelight catching in her eyes. "And you made it safe." "I never thought I'd have both." The next morning, Otakan returned from the ridge with a fresh kill, a young buck, clean shot and heavy with fat. They hung it in the lean-to, and as Hattie salted the meat, she asked, "Will we winter here alone?" He looked up from skinning. "If you want to open the door, we can." "To who?" He wiped his hands on a cloth. "There are families who pass through the lower valley. A few who left the larger settlements behind." She leaned on the post. "Would you want that?" He nodded once. "If they come with respect and need, yes." She thought about the Royce family, about the quiet look Lewin gave her when they parted, something between blessing and understanding. "Then we'll keep the door open." They spent the next weeks chopping wood, sewing thicker blankets, tacking oilcloth over the window frame, and laying herbs in the rafters to dry. Hattie found herself humming again as she worked, though the tune came without shape or reason. One afternoon, Otakan returned from checking the traps with a woven basket carried against his hip. Inside were dried mushrooms, a bundle of sweetgrass, and a small carved flute. "Where did you get that?" she asked, reaching for it. "I made it," he said. "From willow. I thought the sound might suit you." She turned it over in her hands, then brought it to her lips and blew gently. The note came soft and low, carrying through the trees like a bird lingering past season. That night, she played again, the music slipping between the walls like a second fire. Otakan sat with one arm stretched behind her, his chest against her back. "Do you think your father ever wondered where you went?" he asked, voice quiet. She rested the flute in her lap. "I think he found someone else to make a deal with. That was always more real to him than I was." He didn't respond, only wrapped his other arm around her waist and pressed his forehead to her shoulder. "I don't want to carry that weight anymore," she said. "I want to make new things." "You already are," he whispered. The snow came in late October, thick and slow at first. They spent days inside, drying meat, boiling broth, mending gear. One morning, Otakan drew a map on a strip of hide marking where the elk passed, where water pooled after thaw, where the wild plums bloomed in late spring. "Why a map?" she asked, brushing curls from her face. So our children will know this land by heart, he said. She blinked, then looked down at her hands. I hadn't thought ahead that far. I have, he said gently. She looked up. Do you want that? A family? I want what grows here, he said. What we grow together. She stepped forward, touched the edge of the map. Then we will. By December, the valley lay buried under snow. Otakan carved snowshoes from aspen and taught her how to walk without sinking. They hunted rabbits, tracked foxes, and on nights when the wind howled, they lay together beneath the firs, warm and certain. One night, as the fire dimmed to coals, Hattie turned to him. I never imagined love like this. Not loud, not sudden. Just true. He brushed her cheek with the back of his hand. It was waiting. She rested her forehead to his. I was ready to be alone forever. You were never alone, he said. Only searching. In the spring, the valley thawed. The stream swelled, and shoots of green pushed through the soil. They planted again corn, beans, and squash in circles, the way Otakan remembered his father doing. Hattie built a bee box from pine scraps and coaxed the hive into it with smoke and patience. One afternoon, she stood at the edge of the field, hand on her belly. Otakan came up behind her, resting a hand over hers. You knew already. She nodded. I felt it. Like a soft pull toward the center of me. He kissed her temple. Then we will make room. That summer, they built another room onto the cabin, a cradle board hung by the hearth, a bench carved with birds. Otakan painted the door with ochre and ash, marking it with symbols of protection and growth. When the child came, the night was long but not unkind. Hattie labored with her back pressed to Otakan's chest, his arms steadying her through each wave. At dawn, a girl was born, silent at first, then wailing with a voice that filled the valley. They named her Willa, for the willows that lined the stream and for the strength it took to stand through storms. Years passed. The cabin grew, the garden widened, and Willa learned to walk along the stone path her mother laid, to listen for animals with the patience her father taught. In time, other families found their way to the valley, some staying a season, some building homes of their own. But Hattie and Otakan remained the first, and the center. They grew old with dignity, with calloused hands and quiet joy. And when the wind carried through the cottonwoods just right, the sound of Hattie's flute still drifted over the stream, soft as breath, sure as love.